All right, hey guys. Um, what I've got here is an 11 by 14 ampersand clay board, and what I've done is I've taken General's brand graphite powder, mixed it with water, and I've used a brush similar to this, which is just a cheap little chip brush. You can get it at the hardware store, pretty cheap. And what I did was I dipped the brush into the water. I have a little small plastic bowl, disposable kind of thing, and then I've got a little piece of like Tupperware type bowl with a lid, and in that bowl I keep the graphite powder. So what I do first is I'll dip the brush in the water and then into the graphite powder, and I brush that mud onto here, and I try to get some texturing and some striations and just some brush strokes. And now this area here that's lighter, I used a lot more water and thinned it out, and you can see some of these little blooms. They're made by just dribbling water on and letting it pool up. And then these areas here are where I've kind of tipped the board around a little bit to get them to run, and it creates all kinds of interesting textures and weirdness. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this brush, and I'm going to very gently get the dry powder off the very top, because that's going to rub off when I draw on it anyway and just get in the way and make a mess. So I'm going to take this and at an angle, very gently just rub the surface. You can see some of that, maybe, I don't know if you can see that, but some of it's starting to come off there. So by doing it this way, it'll maintain a little bit of that texture underneath when it's gone, when the heavy stuff is off. I don't know if you can see that, but you can very lightly see some of that texture, and I can always bring that back with the pencil later. So what I'm doing here is I'm just going to get all of this, I'm going to go over the whole surface here very gently and get this stuff off. And then once I'm done with getting this off of there, I'll take a light piece of, well, a piece of white cloth like this. This is just old t-shirt material. Actually, I bought this in a big bag at, I believe it was Home Depot. They sell just these scraps. So I take these and I'll burnish this. I'll rub the surface, and that'll take that layer off of there, and it'll make it nice and smooth. And then once I get that done, I can go in with erasers and pencils and water even on a brush and lift away and draw into this like I would on paper with the graphite powder after I've applied it. And then I can work into and back out of the dark areas to create an image. But by doing it this way, I get a whole bunch of interesting little, pretty light texturing that I can add to, take away from, and make the drawing a little more interesting, give it a little movement, adds motion, and just generally texture to the piece. Sometimes I'll do these little pieces where I'll create these crazy textures without a plan, and I'll do that. I'll take the piece and I'll turn it different directions and see what my mind might find in the textures, and then I'll draw into that. So it's not so much of a planned piece like this one is. This one here is for a submission I'm doing for the company Printed in Blood. They're doing another art book. They're the guys that did they're the company that put together the Thing art book that I participated in a few years ago, and they also put together that recent Ghostbusters art book that came out, I believe it was in March, maybe it was May, but that came out this year, where the Thing book came out in 2017. And so get this guy done here. And I thought I would do more of a live thing where I talked about what I was doing a little bit so that you guys would have an idea. Unfortunately, I had put this graphite powder down on this board, a couple weeks now ago or so. Maybe not quite that long, but it was before I decided I was going to do the Kickstarter, and before I decided I needed to get that Raven piece done in order to get my Kickstarter put together. And for those of you that may not have seen me post about it, the Kickstarter has been approved. I was really surprised. I went on last night and put the last graphics in, or yesterday afternoon rather, put the last graphics in after I got the Raven drawing scanned and ready to go. And I pushed that submit button thinking it was going to take 1 to 3 days. This is my first Kickstarter, by the way. So I was shocked when it came back immediately and said I was approved. Now I'm guessing that's because I had been very slowly going through and populating all the sections on that Kickstarter, so there wasn't a whole lot left to put in there, just to finalize those graphics, double check that I had all the information in there to make it, sensible to whoever was reading it, so it doesn't hopefully generate too many questions. I know there'll be some. I've already had someone that I asked review the Kickstarter say that they wanted to back more than one story and get two, one drawing for themselves and one drawing for their spouse. And that's really awesome of them, and I do appreciate that greatly. But Kickstarter has an interesting thing. When you go in there and you back a tier, a reward tier, it only allows you to back one. So what you do is, you choose your thing, and if you decide, I want to upgrade to a higher tier and get more stuff or less stuff or whatever, you can change your pledge. But with the way mine is set up, you're pledging for a specific story. I do have a few categories set up for early birds, so you can get an early bird at a discounted rate, but you're still picking a story. Unfortunately, there's no way that I can think of to effectively allow you to choose two stories, because I'm doing 10 different stories. How do I take one from one story and add it to another without making just more confusion? So what we talked about was she's gonna pledge for her own, and then have her husband set up an account for himself and pledge for whichever story he's interested in. So that's that's very cool, very nice of them. Not that I'm expecting everyone to do that. I'm just bringing that up so that if any of you have that same thought, that might be an issue. Just that there's kind of a flaw in their system. They only allow you to back one tier on a Kickstarter. I don't know if that's a flaw necessarily, but that's a limitation of their system. So this is kind of a slow process, as you can see, and this looks, it just lost a lot of stuff, but if you can, I don't know if you can see the detail in this, but there's a whole lot of stuff going on here that's just very light. And what I can do later is I can use the pencils to bring that back up and push this gray area down with the erasers so that it gets some contrast in there. But so this is going to be for the Halloween book. They're doing an art book for the very first film of the Halloween series, so Michael Myers. It's a John Carpenter film, for those of you who aren't aware of who the director was or creator on that. But yeah, I think he was just producing after that first film. I'm not as familiar with that whole series as I am with the first one. But this, the idea here is I'm going to use, and I did this intentionally, I made a darker side and a lighter side because I'm going to do sort of a portrait of Michael Myers that, you've seen multiple times. Mine will be a little different with all this texture and crazy stuff going on. So you'll have his face coming out of the dark side here, and then I'm thinking over here of maybe taking a wet sponge and creating a blade shape, maybe, like that he's holding it up in front of his face. Maybe. That's my initial thought. but my mind will undoubtedly go to different things while I'm working on this. You know, and in that blade, I could always draw another figure. I could add, you know, him standing there, or I could add something. I don't know. Maybe Jamie Lee Curtis's character. I'll have to double check the specs. I'm not sure if we can use likenesses on this one or not. I think not, but we'll see. So you can see all that graphite powder coming off. If you work with this stuff, you should know that breathing it in isn't a good idea. This stuff's really not good for you. And I'm not wearing a mask, but I'm kind of pushing it all down here. And then I'll have to vacuum this out later because it's, you can see there's a lot. Normally I don't do this in my drawing space, but this is the best place for me to film and show you what I'm doing. So you can see this is all lightening up. I can go back later and add more of the graphite powder on top of this, again with a wet sponge or one of these brushes. So I'm not super concerned about that yet. I can always darken this up quite a bit with the pencils. But yeah, it does take a lot off, but you can see it's giving me a lot of texture and interesting shapes to work with. I know this maybe isn't the most exciting thing, but I wanted to give you guys just another look behind the curtain, so to speak, so you can see how the donuts are made sometimes. If you watch the Quoth the Raven clips or that extended video that I just put up, you'll see how I work on paper with graphite powder, you know, when I lay the graphite powder down first. And I've got three. I've got three different brands of graphite powder. I haven't worked with one of them, the Art Graph brand. But this Generals is what I typically put down. Well, not typically. This is what I put down when I'm doing a dark piece. Because it goes down a lot heavier than the Cretacolor brand. And I use the Cretacolor, when I don't want a super dark piece. Because with this really dark stuff, it's hard to get all the way back to white on paper. It's very hard. I mean, I use electric eraser when I need to really get all the way back, or else I'll seal the drawing and use chalk or something like that on top of the seal drawing after you put down your fixative or clear coat, whatever you're using. But I've been using the Krylon's clear coat for most of my stuff of late. It gets a little shiny sometimes, but you're going to get shiny surfaces with the graphite, so just kind of embracing that whole it is what it is shininess. So yeah, that's typically what I'm using, and I'll use that on this when this is finished too. And what I typically do is I will, oh, look at that, the corner broke, little corner it. I'll have to be sure to get some more wet graphite powder on that little corner down there. A little piece of the clay surface broke off. That happens sometimes. And when you apply the wet graphite powder, you want to either let it sit and dry, let the stuff pool up and just make these little splotches, or you'll want to use a hair dryer or a craft dryer. I've got a little dryer that I use. It looks like a little tiny hair dryer, but it's made for crafts. The thing you got to be careful with, though, is if you keep the heat on one area of this surface for too long, you can cause the surface to bubble and pop, and that pretty much ruins the surface, and it's there's no going back, unfortunately. I had that happen to me once, and that's how I know about it. No one had warned me about that, but so I don't know who invented this technique. It certainly wasn't me, but I got this the idea to do this from Alan Williams by watching him work. And if you're not familiar with his stuff, he's someone I admire quite a bit. Enjoy his work. Very nice person. And I've got a few of his originals around here. Small ones, but yeah, I'm a fan, definitely a fan. So there we go. I've dusted the surface, and now the next part is to wipe it all down, rub it down with the cloth, and you'll see pretty quickly what's going to happen. This gray stuff, you'll see a little more contrast as some of this is lifted off. Maybe not a ton. You already see where it's coming off there. Once I get this all burnished, the entire surface, it'll be to where it will barely come off at all onto your fingertips. And then that can work. It'll be all set. So do this over the entire surface. I probably should be wearing a mask. But I'll get all this vacuumed up here shortly, and then wipe down this board back here. So this board here is another thing I got from Alan. He took a big cradled panel, flipped it over, set his stuff down inside of it, and then used like a T-square or a board to go across it like a maul stick to keep his hand out of the drawing, out of the material. Pretty smart. I mean, painters do it. Why not? Why not with drawings, right? It works really well. So this I put together just using some hardboard or masonite from the home store, Home Depot. And then the runner on here is just 1/2 inch thick MDF. Just cut the strips down on my table saw and then glued and brad nailed them down. So I got a big area to work in. I do have another, a smaller one of these where I used the cradle panel, and it works really well. I also put these little pop socket holders on so I can hang my iPad and my phone and, you know, have all my stuff right here so I can have my reference images or check my messages or whatever I got to do while I'm working. And it's very convenient. And the smaller one I've taken on the road when I'm doing a convention or whatever so that I can continue to work. And that's very handy. So when I do that, I'll prep a board or two and take it with me, and I'll have that. Now this looks like a lot of the texture is gone, but it's still there. So you can take your kneaded eraser and pull back areas. And I don't have my reference, so I don't know exactly where I should erase, but I'm gonna imagine his eyes around in this area. So you can see, you can erase back. You know, to lift that up. And see, when you rub it, it's not really taking much off. So I really shouldn't be doing that without a plan. But yeah, this is the idea. Is I'm gonna do a portrait of Michael Myers with the blade, probably, and a lot of this stuff you'll see me draw back in. I'm gonna film the whole thing. I'll probably time lapse this whole thing, so you don't have to listen to me droning. But just wanted to give you an idea of how I prep these surfaces and give you a little bit of a preview of what might be coming, or what is coming, rather. So hope you're all doing well, staying safe, and more coming soon. Thanks.